With that, we open the Monday, July 13th, first of the budget sessions. I'm going to turn it over to Jim in a minute, but one thing I think we should do at the start is talk about any macros that are in the budget or any preconceptions some of us have, so that 2 days from now we don't, trap ourselves on a thorn, and I have some opinions about things. Jim, you had something to also.
Yeah, I was just going to give an overview of the budget first, but I guess the primary thing and what the mayor and I had talked about, just to let everyone know, we will be responding back to OUC in the letter that we received from them. We sent them a brief, and I've been talking to Chef and John and all the people involved over the weekend, and so that letter is being put together. Hopefully we'll go out either today or tomorrow, but and Wayne has obviously been involved in that as well. So we're getting ready to respond to OUC. Do you want me to give the highlights of the budget?
Yeah, I think you should. What I think we should do is you give what I would call the macros. In other words, the 3% salary increase, all the things that are built into it. I've got some preconceptions, which I think it's better that we talk about our beginning position, and it'll certainly change over 3 days, so that we don't get on the horns of a dilemma. Somebody wants something and it's no longer possible. We've passed that point of no return. So go ahead.
Okay, everyone should have received a copy of the memorandum that covered the budget itself and gave you the highlights, such as the 3% compensation improvement to the city employees. But I had other areas that I thought were even more important. And those are that this would be the first budget in the 4 years since I've been here that we're trying to improve services as opposed to a status quo or a reduction of services. One of those areas is 2 police officers that are being proposed. And I think this is a combination of where we've changed code enforcement back over to the police department, also to improve our community outreach. We think it's more important in today's world to really have more emphasis on the community outreach. How do we respond? How do we work with the various communities around? And then the better patrol to make sure that people see our officers in the field. The council took some action a few years ago where we're trying to reduce our middle management to get more people on patrol cars. This budget reflects that, but at the same time, we're trying to put more officers out on the road as well. So we are proposing 2 police officers in that area. We are proposing 2 full-time lifeguards. Just to put that in perspective, actually we had these lifeguards as temporary full-time, and then so we're putting them at full-time. It reflects the benefits that they would have. We still are keeping the temporary positions in the budget, but the fact of the matter is that when we went out and tried to recruit lifeguards for the beach primarily, we got 0 applications. It was one of those that meeting the qualifications to work on the beach is much more stringent than it is working at a pool. And so and I have already authorized those 2 positions to go up to that position. If the council eliminates that number, then we would go back to reduction of those 2 positions. But we had to, in order to maintain the hours on the beach, we had to make that change. 2 positions in the support areas of IT and finance to encourage our efforts to improve our technology. We need, as the council has made a policy and of trying to make sure that our technology and outreach to the community and to our residents, i.e. the improvements on the website and what we can do there. The position that goes into the finance is going to help us continue our support of both the boards and commissions that the city has and any new ones that you may have that comes up. But we found ourselves in quite a dilemma in trying to get that support groups of those 2 areas that we really need in order to maintain that support to the boards, commissions, and to the community outreach and be able to address some concerns that we get from residents, and Cindy is working in those areas. Additional funding for street paving and maintenance, and it's not only street paving, but it's also maintenance. And this will be the first time that Cindy and I can find where there's actually a transfer from general fund to the street paving and the capital projects. It's in excess of $400,000, but that was a priority again that the council put, is that they wanted us to make sure that we were keeping pace with our street paving issues going forward. Another thing is, and another policy of the council is, you wanted to make sure that we watched and controlled headcount in the organization. This is a reduction of 2 positions organizational wide, even though we're showing the additional positions coming in. If you look at us through our org chart, it's a reduction of 2 positions. The continued efforts to upgrade our recreational facilities, we are putting major emphasis. We did quite a bit of work last year. It was really not as much as we should be doing, especially on some of our age structures. This budget allows for us to do those continued efforts in those maintenance and operation. But important emphasis, again, is on maintenance of existing facilities. We're not planning a major recreational complex of any type. What we're trying to do is to make sure what we have is sound and safe for the community to use. Even when you have fundraisers, example, Humison Park, and we really appreciate what Kelly and those folks did. They raised over $200,000. But it's going to cost us somewhere in the neighborhood of $50,000 to make those improvements. So we've got to have the matching funds if we're going to make sure that our facilities are maintained and if we want that community support. So this allows that to take place. Another position that this allows for is our coordinator, recreation coordinator. One of the issues that we have, we're getting more diverse in the activities and the demands of activities in our recreational area. So we have reduced staff substantially in the recreation department, and so we think that this recreation coordinator is a very vital part to make sure that we bring ourselves back up to standards of what the recreation department should be providing as we go forward. We are continuing to fund the vehicle replacements with primary emphasis in the police department. As you know, when we did a lot of our reductions over the last few years in order for the downturn of the economy, we did cut back on maintenance and we cut back on the purchase of vehicles. Now we're trying to catch up on this. This will continue what we have done in this fiscal year going forward in buying these and making sure the patrol officers are in a proper equipment, that we don't have breakdowns on roads and those type of things. The other thing that we addressed here is we reduced the contribution from the electric department to the general fund. Again, an emphasis and a policy that the council set. It's a little over $140,000 that'll be reduced. We're still maintaining our 6%, but it is a reduction in our dependence and reliance on the money being transferred from the electric to the general fund. Again, that does place pressures on other revenue streams that we have to address. That is the overall that I have. Cindy obviously will be able to address many of the other issues and sort of cover the memo a little bit better than I did.
Okay. I was going to just, if you don't mind, to set some of the macros that you were talking about in addition to what the city manager mentioned. So the budget you have in front of you, as directed by you on June the 17th, is balanced in the general fund at a millage rate of 2.6437, which is a 30% higher millage rate than last year's adopted millage rate. We also got the certified taxable property value from the property appraiser, and that was a 7.9% increase in taxable value. And those two things combined generate $1.7 million more in ad valorem taxes than last year. Those went to the following list of things, many of which the city managers covered: the new police officers, a part-time parking enforcement officer in response to the concerns about parking, the full-time lifeguards and rec coordinator, the new positions in finance and IT, that transfer for the first time to the general fund capital of $450,000. Also a salary increase of 3% across the board for all employees. An increase of 4.3% in health insurance rates, which we consider to be extremely good news, because when we talked about this on June the 17th, it was scheduled to be over 15%, and this is the actual renewal rate, so that's a step in the right direction. And as we all know, our contributions to the new defined contribution plan are slightly higher than the DB plan from last year. You have an attachment B schedule that shows the positions by department, the salaries compared to last year. There is that net decrease citywide of 2 positions, and as a result, there was a net increase of $225,000 citywide for salaries, because the decrease in positions was offset by that proposed 3% wage increase. The pension costs have increased about $450,000 citywide from last year's budget. When we get to talking about the plus, the minus, the plus, the minus of the pension, it gets a little confusing because remember, last year you budgeted for 1 quarter's worth of a defined contribution plan. So there's really not many places it's apples and apples, but essentially this is based on the recently adopted 9% of salaries for existing employees and 7% of new hires. One big thing that's not in here, though, is the OPEB funding. At the time we had the workshop on the 17th, you had directed me to look into the possibility of partial funding. My preliminary discussions with our OPEB actuary and in looking at the new OPEB standards says essentially that if you're going to fund an OPEB trust, you need to fund the OPEB trust. To partially fund it, to go into it with the idea that you will change assumptions, particularly you cannot really go from a longer amortization period, a shorter one to a longer one at a whim. To fund it some years and not others, to partially fund the annual required contribution, all of those things may actually make our balance sheets and our CAFRs look worse, because what you would be doing is the actuary would establish an ARC, and instead of pay as you go, which is fine, or funding the ARC, you'd be partially funding it, which might actually cause them to force you to raise the discount rate, et cetera. So the bottom line of this is one of those things that we can have some further conversation with the auditors, but the actuary essentially says that once you're in, you need to be in, and that's a fairly major impact to the budget. So at this time, it's not included in there, but certainly we can talk about doing that. But a partial inclusion doesn't look like it's really going to be helpful. The electric utility shows a small surplus. The budget that you have in front of you for the electric utility is based on that last base case scenario that PRMG did that says that all of our contracts, et cetera, are status quo. That's the best budget we have right now. That's the one thing I have that has real numbers I can hang my hat on. But obviously, as we continue our efforts to get new purchase power contracts or renegotiate with OUC, those costs may go down. They wouldn't go up. So we're sort of dealing from the base case right now. The water and sewer utility budget has a surplus of $262,000. The other big thing in here is this includes a draft stormwater utility fund for the capital costs, moving them out of Fund 304 and funding them through a new stormwater utility fee. Again, that budget's in there at a number that's required to balance it against all the projects. But as you move through this process with your consultant, that's when you will be making decisions about what level you'd like to fund a stormwater utility at, and as a consequence, how many projects you'd like to do. So this is just revenue offsetting the whole list of projects, but that would be a work in progress as you move through that process. And then the city manager already addressed basically the things we've done to enhance the capital improvement program with that transfer of $450,000 from the general fund. I did give you a couple of extra pieces of paper. You have in front of you org charts to facilitate our discussion about the various departments, so you should have this in front of you. And then something that we don't need till Wednesday, which is a memo regarding the potential cost of living adjustment for general employee pensioners. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, or we can dive right in at your pleasure.
Questions of Cindy?
Yeah, quick question. Looking at, we talked about a 3% change. Thank you very much. We talked about a 3% change in operating salary, but on page 8, when it's the overview of expenditures, it shows a 6.6% increase.
That would include the new positions as well as the 3% increase for the existing employees.
Okay, so that skews that one.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know what the current status of the stormwater consultant is on coming up with a plan for that?
Yes, I can't see his money behind us. I'm
part of the committee. We've received a cost proposal, and we're negotiating with them, and I believe we're shooting for which agenda? He's not here yet.
Either
Sean's
July or the first meeting in August.
Maybe August, yeah. Yeah, we're just...
Okay, what's concerning is that we're reviewing a budget, assuming that that's going forward, and yet we have no details on that utility authority.
Correct. We must point out that utility analysis is only going to give you what your rates would produce in revenues. So it shouldn't be relevant to, are we going to do do a stormwater utility or not.
Essentially, what we'd be doing is, other than a little bit of, there's about $25,000 a year programmed in 304 in the street paving and capital fund. And other than that sort of routine maintenance, we would hold off on any additional stormwater projects until the council reached a conclusion about funding through a stormwater utility or not. If you decide not to at any level, then we would have to amend the capital and construction budget to fold the stormwater projects back into that budget. So certainly, the idea is we'll hold off on any major new initiatives other than those budgeted in the current year. But we should, in a pretty timely fashion, within the first quarter or so of next year, start to get a feel for whether you want to fund a stormwater utility or not, and at what level. Again, that budget is the whole list of projects, but you could fund it at half of that. Once the consultant says to you, here's what it takes in rates to produce that much revenue, you could make a decision that you want to produce half that much revenue and do half the project.
The study that we're going to have is going to tell us what impermeable surfaces relative to residential, commercial, and these type of things. So it really is not a defining instrument. Are we going to have a stormwater utility?
I think for the voters, it certainly would be a defining instrument to know what they're.
Well, when you start looking at the rate, I agree.
I agree with that. Just a general comment. When we had our elections last November, and during those elections, I was the only candidate that said yes, I would consider raising taxes, and that my focus on a tax increase is, first of all, clearing up our unfunded pension liability, which I think that's included in the budget that we've gone forward with setting up this defined contribution plan, et cetera. Also, I would like us to seriously consider this OPEB. I think.
Yeah, I think Wednesday we need to come back to a serious discussion of OPEB. That's on my list of 5 or 6 macros.
Me also.
So I think we need to come back to it, and you need to be prepared to go into depth, because the reality of it is we got to face it sometime, and it should be something we begin to face. I think we all know that it'll take many years to satisfy it. And on the stormwater utility, the way it's in the capital budget is, it's like we're going to fix every problem in 5 years, and we know we're not going to do that. I'd like to do that, quite frankly, but I don't think that's going to happen, and I think we'll go at some lower rate. It's got to be an acceptable rate also. So I'm not too concerned about that with the way you phrased it, and that we cross over the bridge and decide what to do at the proper time, whatever that is. But it has to be done, but it doesn't have to be done to any particular level. It's a decision. Some of the macros I have, I'm not going to be, just up front, I'm not going to be for a police shooting range. I can think of better uses for capital. I don't care where we have to send the police. I am for the police officers, but not the capital range. And another thing, I'm going to pass this out, which I didn't do, but he's got one. But essentially, I wanted to talk about 2 things in particular: the transfer on the electric, and this is valuable for that consideration, and taxes. And I think we're going to face a tax increase, and of course, running for re-election, that's not something a politician would like to do, but I think it has to be done. But on the electric, quite frankly, I'd like to take the transfer down another $150,000 this year. Bear with my logic. We'll certainly succeed in getting something like an $8 or $9 million reduction in revenue, and all of that. Some of that will be next year. I think enough to drive $250,000 down, and then into the future. If you take 6% of what the new revenue is likely to be, it's going to be like $450,000 or $500,000 the transfer is going to be. So when you look at this sheet here, the results tend to get better, but that's not really so if you hold to the 6% transfer. By the way, in looking at this sheet, all that has been done here, and this is a very gross working sheet. I didn't do it. I presume Jim or Cindy did it. None of the numbers have changed in it except the top number. So all it really does is So the numbers have changed slightly for city council, city manager, but they've changed only very slightly. It's only directional. But what it does is it says if you were to do what I just said and increase the transfer or decrease the transfer from electric another $150,000, you'd be in the hole $100,000. See, we have a $43,000 surplus, and if we increase the transfer, which I think needs to be done, because I think in the year ahead, I think we are going to succeed in bringing down the electric rates, and when we do that, 6% of a lower revenue is a lower number. And I think we got to face it, and I think we have to start facing it. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, and I have had a lot of thought about this, and Amelia, you said, and I'm reading from the transcript, said that you would not like to raise taxes, but there would be, but then they would be back at this point next year and the years after. The question is, when do we address it? You also said that we went from one extreme to the other. We have to build a balance. She said we were looking at numbers. A number of events over the past years, employees were run ragged because they did not have enough staff. She said they cannot keep burning everyone out and hope that we would hold on long enough for someone else to fix it. Mr. Olds said, we have cut the budget deeper than we should have in the past couple of years. He said that the anticipated selling the utility, we anticipated that. He also said the only thing that we really can do, and the only way we can raise revenue, is raise taxes in order to get the services backed up to where they should be. The idea of saying no to raising taxes is in the past. We can't do that anymore. In order to get the services back where they should be, we're going to have to raise taxes. I think what we're going to cross over in the next 3 days is how much we raise taxes, but I don't think there's any choice. And for myself, and this is what I wanted to say, for myself, I believe that rather than trickle the thing, I mean, last year the county went from 308.92 to 326.20, and they're talking about a tax increase this year. And of course, we go back to George H. Bush and read my lips, but the reality of it is I would like to see us have the goal of having whatever the tax increase is this year sufficient so that we don't have to cross over this into future years. And I think that was the thrust of Ms. Graves' comments. In other words, we were responsible and we were elected to do what was proper. And I think the proper thing is, to try to set the revenue so that we can meet the expectations of the people. Those are the only macros I have, but I would on Wednesday like to have a general discussion of who has the gavel August 19th and forward. I believe that the things that I was concerned about, the lagoon, the city, the finances, we're going to cross over the financings by Wednesday, and the electric, I believe we'll be well on our way to having come to a resolution. And so I'd like to talk about who is the mayor and so on, the vice mayor, on Wednesday, and then I would serve through the 19th, and after that point in time, it's whatever the pleasure of council is. But I said I would do that. I feel that I should do that. So we can have that discussion on Wednesday. Those are my comments. Ms. Graves or Mr. Kramer?
Well, I think the votes of the council pretty much set the policy and the momentum for this budget season. We did increase the ad valorem revenues last year by 4.5%, 4.4 actually. Whether you call that a tax increase or not, we did increase the revenues from ad valorem last year. This year, it looks like 39.8% increased. That's a lot. That's a heck of a lot. That's more than I can stomach. However, I personally like to start at a budget that is comparable from last year's and add in, the reason you do that is that you have the public come in and tell you the value relationship of what they're willing to pay for and what they want, rather than us make the assumption of, we think the public wants this. We think they'll be willing to pay for this. God help you. I hope you're right. But if you're wrong, all of a sudden the pendulum swings and you get a different philosophy in council. Hopefully we're trying to keep the boat from rocking one side or the other, and we can keep a moderated type of council, just moving towards our goals. I really do like the idea of keeping our services and upkeeping the city. I don't have a problem, increasing the taxes, but increasing them to the amount that's on here, I can't go there. But I do agree with a lot of the ideas that we've got. My hope is that the Dodgertown transaction would give us money for streets, and it wouldn't have to be in here. The stormwater utility would be displacing some of the taxes. It would allow us to continue to do our projects in here. Unfortunately, the HR issues, I'm one of those guys that believes $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. And it seems like we're contemplating saving at $1 tomorrow at the expense of, several dollars today. And I can't go down that road. But I am in agreement that I think the services are needed, and I think some of the capital improvements need to be there. So I'm in agreement with a fraction of a lot of these increases, but not the whole thing.
Well, that's why we're here, to figure that out. That's fair.
Well, this is the problem that I've got. I mean, you've created a big budget, and now you're asking us to micromanage to bring it down. That's, in my book, if you got 3 votes that created this, it's a waste of time to micromanage to cut it out and bring it back down. Whereas if you started at a baseline budget and added it in there, it's a little bit more constructive in cost. Before the idea of having this budget coming out with these larger numbers, I wasn't given any information as to, the longevity of streets, the longevity of our projects. All of a sudden it was just, we feel that this is the way it's done. And I'm not doubting it, but I just, the method that we've done the last 4 years is that you have a base budget. The public came in and says, hey, we really want these services, and we added them in there. And we did increase the taxes last year. And I don't have a problem doing that. I just would like to see the public have that value relationship that says, we're willing to pay the taxes and we're willing to have these services.
I think we lose, starting with that 30% increase automatically, we lose that transparency, for the public to know, hey, okay, this is where we are. We're going to we want this increase for these following things. And maybe as we proceed through this week, we can define those clearly, and lay them out, because I think it's important for the taxpayers to see.
Yeah, it's a good comment.
I understand those positions, but we are where we are. It's July 13th. This is what we're set out to do. We can wax nostalgic about what we didn't do, or we can go forward and move through this.
I think when we sat down before, we looked at a whole lot of different things. We didn't start. I think there was quite a bit of thought that maybe no one would agree to a tax increase the last time, and that when we sat around and looked at all the projects we had almost no other option but to suggest a significant tax increase. And that, I thought that was a pretty fair process that we went through, and then we gave you guidelines to come back with something that fit that 30% increase. So I think the process went fairly well. I think there were some of the details we wish we had more of, but not many of them. I mean, we've been discussing a lot of these things a lot, and so I think the process is pretty much there. I'm not particularly anti the 30%. I have some questions I mirror some of the same concerns that Dick had. The police range, I think, is something we don't need to do. OPEB, I'm serious about doing that if it works. I mean, if the numbers are reasonable, I'd really like to do that. I share the utility issues and wonder if there was if we're including everything in that when we're just reducing the draw, whether there's some other issues that should come up in that. And I question the FEMA stuff. I don't really understand the FEMA kind of things. Yeah, and I wonder if there's some way we can we can go after that money somehow. And I have no history with it. I don't know really what it's there, but it's a big number. And yeah.
We have a very long history with them.
Well, it's called politics, and what happens is out of this process we'll come to an end point, and that's it'll be something different probably than any one of us would put on a sheet of paper, but that's not a bad thing. I would point out that the Vero Beach share of a homeowner's bill is roughly 11%. So even using the very large number of 30%, which really scares me to tell you the truth, it is only 3% of the bill. But I guess we move forward. Jim, I'll turn it back over to you.
Can I one more thing, if it's helpful? We've done this in years past. As we go through and you have things you want back in or things you are talking about taking out, I can put dollar values on them for you. But if you look at this very first page of the memo, that little laundry list, if you will, those bullet point list right there, essentially is the list of things that add up to the $1.7 million in tax increase. So again, if you, as an example, eliminated a $450,000 capital project, you could eliminate this $450,000 transfer, or you could put it on another project. So I will sort of keep track as you move through this of puts and takes, and then we can recap it at any time you want.
Well, I think I would certainly appreciate you doing that. I mean, the reality is if the taxes go up $100,000 or $1 million or whatever the number happens to be, the $1.7 million that's on the sheet of paper, I feel accountable to say 480 went to roads and,
and that can be done.
And you will be saying that.
In other words, we have to define the service or the infrastructure we're providing for that amount of money, to me.
And there's no other places, thank you very much. There are no other places that you can really cut. I mean, you can't say, okay, we're way overstaffed over here, let's cut a whole bunch over there. So if we add something in, we got to subtract something else. It's not a big area that are cutting.
You're kind of working within that $1.7 million. So example, the OPEB, if you decide you're really committed to that, in the general fund, that's about $360,000 out of your $1.7 million. So what would you like to either not do or cut in order to replace it with that $360,000? I mean, it's complicated, but it's simple. You've got a laundry list. Are these what you want? Do you not want some of these, or do you want to replace some of these with something else that means more to you?
Well,
you do have embedded cost. I mean, you got to keep the lights on in this room as an example. So you're really talking about those expenditures that you can have privy to and control of. And one of those is, for example, personnel.
It's about the only one that's of any real significance in the general fund.
Personnel that is our heaviest cost because we are a very labor-intensive business, and that's what the only way. Nobody has yet figured out how to remotely send an electronic robot to answer a police call. I mean, it just doesn't happen. No one wants to have an outage in their electric and say, well, we'll get to you tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock because we don't spend overtime. Or you have your water goes out or your sewer backs up. So we are very labor intensive, but that is the area of flexibility and the highest cost of anything in our budget. The rest of it, I mean, you can reduce, for example, purchasing police cars, which we have done, and it did help bring numbers down, but it's somewhat artificial because the next year you got to put the officers back in the car. Doing the roof at Leisure Square is something that we don't have to do, but after so many blue tarps wear out, you've got issues at Leisure Square. So, but again, those are the issues that you have. Now, if we decide that we're not going to be in the Leisure Square business, or we're not going to be in the lifeguard business, or we're not going to be in this business or that business, then that brings a different component. What we're trying to do is maintain the level of services, which is what Cindy and I have tried to do for the last 4 years.
Well, and I think that's what you're seeing is the ability of past councils to keep a tight budget has now caught up to us when you look at all of these outdated, overused obsolete items that we have to work on either replacing, maintaining, or just getting rid of. And as far as to the public, you've set budgets before where you've cut drastically and you've had people come in to fight to just keep those services, but we've never offered the people opportunity to see what it's like when they keep saying, we want more of this, we want more of that. And for the first time, we're saying, okay, if you really do want more of these things, this is what it looks like. So I think as much as you've cut before to see if people really want something, showing what it's going to cost to have these things, it's just as an important exercise.
Well, the important thing about that is you have the public interaction, and that's what you need. Having the public come in and say, we want these things, is really the goal. And I'll be the first to admit that I think we cut a little bit too much in the past budgets. I think the proof of that is that the reserves have gone up quite significantly. With this budget, I mean, I'd be willing to go on the record and bet that our reserves are going to go up quite a bit after this, because there's a lot of positions that I don't think we're going to fulfill. We don't attract people to Vero Beach to work here. So, I really think that, you put these budgets out there, and if you can encourage people to come in, whether that's for what you're doing or against what you're doing, the fact that you've encouraged people to come in, that's what we really need to do.
This is Political Science 101. Remember the type of democracy we have. It's a representative republic. The idea that you think, as an example, that the guy that is trying to raise a family, that has a husband and wife, goes to Leisure Square on the weekend, are going to come down here and tell you what they want, it ain't going to happen. So you need to, if you want to know what people at Leisure Square want, go out there and talk to them. If you want to know what people on police services you want, go to one of the community neighborhood get-togethers and ask them. But people don't have time to flood in here. If you had 10%, just think, 10% of our population, 1,500 people, where would you hold that meeting? We would have to go.
Stadium.
And you couldn't get them. I don't think you could get 1,500 people in there. I think we'd be going to Orlando or something. But what I'm saying, Jay, and it's one of those things, somewhere along the line, you as elected officials, we as appointed officials, have to say these are the services we're going to offer in our city. But if you're waiting around for the great majority, you're going to hear, just think of our council meetings. It's usually the repetition of the same people, and it's probably no more than 20.
Well, we do get letters and we do get phone calls. I get a lot of people that call us. And, oddly enough, I do encourage that.
Out of 15,000, how many people do you...
I'll get 3 or 4 a week on this thing.
And I agree. And you are going to get people who are going to be on one side or the other. If they've had a positive encounter with the police department, they want more policemen. They've had a negative encounter with the police department, they don't want anymore. If they've had a positive encounter with the electric department, they don't have any problem with rates. If they've had a negative encounter, i.e. didn't pay their bill and their lights were turned off, you're going to get that type of response. And I'm just saying that, and again, to me, it was Political Science 101. But I agree with you. We need to get input from citizens, and I think going to, for example, Friday night on Main Street, and you're talking to diversity of people, going to the beachside where they have the concerts, going to those type of activities, sitting down with the OBA, going to the chamber functions, that's where you get those type of inputs. But again, I think that should more or less give us a concept of where we think we want to go. But it's not going to formulate, do we need 2 more police officers, as an example.
All right. I think what we should do is move to page 5. I've got a few comments. In other words, what you've got on the agenda, somebody's got.
Can I ask just one question?
Here, you may ask any question.
Just as a way of format, we have a lot of different sort of departments. Finance is not finance, not utilities broken down to a lot. Planning is broken down to a lot. Is there a reason to have that many different little budgets, or? Yeah.
One of the primary reasons is actually we have our general ledger constructed in accordance with the state's Uniform Code of Accounts.
Oh, okay.
And so, what ultimately that is used for is the ability to translate our budget into a like budget with every other municipality in the state through some reports that we provide to the Department of Financial Services and also to the Auditor General, so that they can do comparatives statewide for municipalities. And so that's really the reason for it. We have in the past few years done actually a fair amount of combining of departments with similar functions. For instance, we had separate street, stormwater, and traffic, and the Public Works Department combined all three of those. But you really can't just lump it all together as one giant general fund department. You have to distinctively account for attorneys versus city managers versus councils in accordance with the state's requirements.
Yeah, the one that Randy, I've had this conversation 4 years ago and 5 years ago and so on when I was in finance. So the one that takes the cake is water and sewer. There are more darn departments.
And actually, they've consolidated. They actually consolidated down. They're at like 5 departments now, and they were at something like 10 before.
I mean, okay, we have reuse water, we have wastewater, and we have water. To me, it's 3, but never mind.
We call it transparency. We want to get down to the detail of the division.
I lost this argument a long time ago. You won the argument.
Couldn't do it in this sort of budget process. I mean, your accounting can be one thing, but
no, it's our accounting system that builds this budget document.
Oh, okay.
It comes directly out of our accounting system, and then once you've adopted it, we load it into the general ledger. So,
of course, you can make a motion to approve the whole thing at any time. Just keep in mind.
The other one that drives me nuts is the marina. We have the marina division and some other division, and you got to look at the two, the moorings division. And then the only way I can figure it out is look at the general ledger.
And actually, the reason for that is a submerged lands lease that we have with the state of Florida. So, I mean, none of it's arbitrary, to be honest with you. It's
Cindy, I surrender.
It's compliance.
I don't surrender yet.
We've got a newbie.
It's one word. It's one word, compliance. Compliance, and we're fans of it. So,
you won that argument a long time ago. But the impression is, if you have a $300 or $500 million business, how many divisions do you need? But
although you would be astounded on the other side, how many times you get asked the question, how much do we spend on X, Y, Z and so-and-so's department? And if you have a general ledger at this level of detail, you can answer that question without a lot of side analysis. So, it works in some ways.
It is.
I wanted to make one comment about the general fund revenues, and that is, at the time we put this out, that we had not received the state of Florida's revenue estimates because of some delays in the legislature, which trickled down to us.
Really?
And they actually have posted the preliminary estimates as of a couple of days ago. And the good news is that the state revenue sharing is up about $9,200.
Which one is the state revenue?
$9,200. That's $9,200 on line item 335012000, state revenue sharing, about 10 or 12 down, where it's 556, 547. It is now 565, 764. And then 3 more down, half-cent sales tax is up $86,982 to $1,121,923. So just like that, we got a nice $97,000 boost in our revenue side. They do reserve the right to change their mind about those as they move through the summer, but typically they don't change them once they've posted them. They're very short-staffed.
However, if we lower the utility bills, utility taxes will go down.
Right. The other two that they actually give us the numbers for that they have not posted yet are the local option gas tax up there at the top and the local communications services tax. That particular one has not had a good trend in recent years because of changes in the laws regarding the way it's calculated. So until I see that one and it stays level or goes up, I'm not really rejoicing about the $97,000. So I'm hoping that one either stays constant or goes up a little bit. But it's had a downward trend in the last couple of years.
Yeah, you can see that. It was $1,231,000 and 13-14.
And actually from 12-13 to 13-14, I think it went down like a couple $100,000. They changed something about the way they calculate that communication services tax on wireless, prepaid wireless cards and some of those other things. So that's what happened there.
I think on the MPO, they said not to get too excited about the local option gas tax either. They're getting kind of sticky with that.
I think we're going down just a smidge there. So the increase might just be offset by decreases in those other two in the next couple of weeks. I should know the answer.
When will we know?
What they put up on the website was that they should have these other two estimates by the end of July. But again, they normally rely on information from the legislative budget session in order to complete their estimates, and they just got delayed. So hopefully we'll know here pretty quick. But
Okay. If you look at the rest of the revenue, there are 3 or 4 more that interest me, and the first one is Recreation Department income, budgeted at 360, going down 6,000. I talk about this every year, and I think we went down in this last year as a result of talking about it. But the 7th month, and I do have an 8-month general ledger, but I just got it, is 144. In other words, this is one we usually fail to get.
Actually, this is what I did to come up with these revenue estimates. And remember, this is one that I use this analysis in order to normalize it for the seasonality. So what I do is I look at the last 3 or 4 years of actuals. I look at the percent of the eventual total that was collected through month-end May, and then I use that same percentage applied to year-to-date to make a projection for year-end. So, again, we take in a heavy amount of revenue in the summer, and that's my attempt to seasonalize it. It's not pro rata. So it has gone down a little bit. If you look at the top, I think I'm using the 3-year average, and dialed a little bit back off of that. But those are very, very seasonal revenues, so that's how I adjust for the seasonality. And that's not just the rec department income, but all the recreation associated revenues.
And the 3-year average is 349 for what it's worth. Okay. Your administrative charge has gone from 2548 to 2818, and I know what that is, but let's talk about it. That's your 2 additional people, or what is that?
It's partly that. Probably the bigger impact on that one is the fact that we ended the risk management fund this year, and we absorbed the entirety of the human resources department back into the general fund. But even though that whole 200,000+ came back as an expense, a very good percentage of the human resources costs go back out to the other funds as an administrative charge. The HR department is allocated to the other funds on the basis of the percentage of total employees that are in each of those funds. So you ended up with a very small net effect of putting HR back into the general fund, because then it also gets added back into the administrative fund that's charged back out. The additional people are part of it, but the bigger impact is that risk management.
As you go through the expenditures, what you find is that many departments, garbage pickup are negatively affected, or marina are small departments. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'd like to know is how much of it is the risk management and how much of it is the salary of the plus 250,000 or 260,000, as the case may be.
The risk management is a huge part of it. I can get you a number.
Because we're going to keep crossing over it of why water and sewer has got a higher administrative charge.
I decided that the risk management net effect was about 252 in, and then maybe a couple hundred that back out. The reason that it negatively impacts, and I'll get you a better number here in just a minute, but the reason it negatively impacts those other funds is in years past, before we did away with self-insured health insurance, each of those funds actually made an annual deposit into the risk management fund. About 3 years ago, they stopped making those annual deposits. And so they got to the good that year by the amount they used to have to pay into the risk management fund, and they stayed that way for a couple of years. And we lived off the balance, if you will, in the risk management fund. Well, now that balance has been depleted. And so really those other funds like the Marina and the Solid Waste Fund, all they're doing now is making an allocation toward the Human Resources Department as opposed to their contribution to the risk management fund that they were making every year back when we were self-insured. So they got the benefit for a couple of years of not having to do that, and now they have to go back to paying the price.
Why don't we do this in an interest of time? Why don't you bring back, tomorrow or whenever, a better view of why it went up $250,000. I mean, I understand the logic of it. It's going to affect almost every enterprise fund.
Mm-hmm. It does, but again, they won for a couple of years by not having to pay into the risk management fund.
But this is this year, as Amelia points out. We have to live through this year.
Come and go. But I will. I can do a little side by side of how much got from each department got allocated out prior years versus.
Yeah, I mean, just to understand it. I'm not arguing with it. I'm just saying I'd like to understand it.
That's easy.
There are 2 others here that strike me on the revenue page. The one is code enforcement fines, and here we're talking about more code enforcement and moving code enforcement to the police department, and we're going from 75 to 25. It seems like we're it's counterintuitive.
Really hasn't panned out this year is part of the problem. I mean, we put in 75 last year, I think it was, when we really wound it up, and it just isn't panning out so far. That's one of those ones, it's really there designed to offset the costs, which you'll see back in non-departmental. We can, I hate to sound callous, but we can make that whatever you think is appropriate. In the scheme of the entire general fund revenues, we're usually very, very close to the total, and that's a pretty small number. So if you want me to raise it back up, I can. It just hasn't been panning out, so I lowered it.
Would you like it to perform better than expected?
I'm good either way. Whatever you'd like to do is fine.
And the other, it gives you all some flexibility, when we bring some of those.
Okay, but it's an asterisk. The last one I have is the contribution from the electric fund. And just for the fun of it, if you assume the revenue in here is correct, and if you assume January 1st we have a significant decrease, and I hate to mention any number, but if the revenue goes down, 9 million, 8 million, whatever, you're going to end up with a revenue next year of $87 million. And 87,160,000 for what it's worth. In other words, the revenue is going to go down because we're going to be successful lowering the power bill one way or another, and that's going to come out of all the actions we're taking, but in particular, paying less for the half of the power we get from OUC. Our transfer would calculate, if we are successful, and I realize the little word "if" is a big one, would transfers at 5,230,000. And it wouldn't transfer at 550. So in going down $140,000, in effect, I think we need to go down more and begin to affect reality. And then in the succeeding years, the transfer would be more like $5 million flat, not what's on the sheet I passed out. I'm willing to table this one for now, but I'm going to push.
You might as well not table it. I mean, if that's something you want to reduce, because we're going to have to reduce our costs somewhere to reflect those, and so there's no reason. We don't want to wait till Wednesday, and you've agreed to 2 police officers, and then you reduce our revenues by 140,000. We need to.
So, are you
what our revenue stream?
Got this for not the full year, but when it might take effect?
Yeah, I have it for January 1st, which it would calculate at 5,230,000 would be the transfer. I mean, that's, we don't know how much we're going to go down on the power rate. And I hesitate to take a number, but I took, I won't give you a percent, but what I'll do is I'll say I use $9 million or thereabouts that we're going to be able to reduce as of January 1st. Now, it may not be January 1st, it may be March 1st.
Yeah.
But if it was January 1st, it calculates to 5,230. And I'd settle for another 100,000, quite frankly. But I don't think 5.5 is the right number.
Are there any other offsetting costs, like chefs? Are there any other legal fees or anything like that would go away on our expense area that would offset that somehow?
Not really.
I think our legal fees are going up. I mean, we obviously are now in negotiations with OUC, which brings in another party. We still have the Supreme Court, and we still have Indian River Shores.
Yeah, now it's finally good.
The other thing is, and we had this conversation a couple of years ago when we talked about selling the electric utility, even if we negotiated those new contracts in time for January 1, it's not like falling off a cliff. I mean, there's a trail out period where old invoices come where we would have to slowly dismantle or decommission the power plant to reach that $9 million mark. So there's probably going to be a goodly portion of the year as a tail down. It's not like one day we're this and the next day, bam, it's $9 million less. So, but whatever your pleasure is, we don't true this up.
I could live with taking it down $100,000. I think it's directionally correct. I think it'll be more than that. I think it'll be considerably more than that.
But understand that we don't. Just so you know, we don't true this up. We establish a number as part of the budget process, and it just stays that. And we don't true it up in years when we take in more revenue, and we don't true it up in less. So
in my heart, I know the revenue is going down, and in my heart, I know that if we put 6%, if we put 5.5, we're over collecting. Do I know precisely that number is going to come out 5,270,000? No, I don't. but I do think we've taken 140 out. I think we need to take another 100 out. That's what I think, but I'm just one.
No, and my only point was that it won't go down accidentally. In other words, we don't true it up. So whatever you establish it at now, I'll keep it there. So if you want to lower it, now would be the time to do it. It won't lower itself through decreases in revenue.
I think it's the thing to do. I think it's a responsible thing to do.
Why don't we talk about that when we go through the electric fund side? Because I think we're going to be making some changes on the expenses side. The question
doesn't affect the transfer.
Well, it does affect the transfer in that those expenses that you cut, do you make the decision that benefit goes to the ratepayers or does it go to the city? If it goes to the city, it affects the transfer. If it affects the ratepayers, then that break will go onto the rates. You're taking the power plant off. You're reducing employee expenses.
But again, what I prefaced this whole conversation with was right now that budget is predicated on the status quo and the base case scenario prepared by PRMG. Everything else is negotiations and speculation at this point. So if, as a council, you'd like to adopt a different budget, a budget that says halfway through the year we're dismantling the power plant and in January 1 we're going to have brand new contracts, then we can do that.
Well,
but the whole budget will change.
Is that we've got a lot of speculation on a worst case scenario, and we've got a lot of activities that could bring in some significant money. If we set the millage based on a worst case scenario, we're just going to end up with a pile of money afterwards if the other activities come through.
No, because I do not true up the transfer from the electric utility.
I'm talking more like with the Dodgertown thing and a stormwater utility thing. I mean, we've got activities that do affect the budget quite often. The question is do we set it at a worst case scenario and then have these activities?
And here's the danger, though, and this is I really want to put a big wall between these things. For the very first time, we're making a transfer from the general fund operating budget into the capital project fund. But we need to continue to think of those things as two separate things. That Dodgertown money, it would be, in your opinion, a capital project item, and we would take the money and actually defray debt service, freeing up 1 cent sales tax money that can only be spent on capital projects. So just because we're making that first-time transfer into the capital project fund, please let's not start commingling in our mind the issue of infrastructure improvements and operating budgets.
That's
because
correct.
You cannot,
I'd like to not have that commingling.
you cannot take 1 cent sales tax money and go back the other direction with it. So think of it as we got this one $450,000 transfer into the capital project fund. You can keep that intact or not, or you can free up other capital project money.
I don't want to get off topic, but I think this is very valid, but I'd like to talk about it when the electric side comes around.
But one thing I just want to say is, having watched this process from the outside and now participating in it, different years, different hypotheticals have ruled decisions, and some of those things have never panned out.
Right.
And so I think planning on hypotheticals, big hypotheticals, rather than what we actually know in front of us, can get us into trouble.
Well, the problem is that this is my 5th budget, and it's like every budget we've done, the reserves went up. So it's like we may have been saying it'd been too conservative, and we probably were. But every time we did these budgets, we came back with the CAFRs and the numbers and the reserves went high, which means we probably should have spent some money. And we probably either we should have spent money or we overcollected.
The way I look at this $5.5 million is really a tax. I mean, the reality of it is we're raising $5.5 million, and we're taking it out of the electric and putting it into the power rates. I mean,
which is a reduction from last year. But all that being said, I mean, let's just get down to the bottom line. If we want to reduce revenues going into the general fund by whatever the number is, let's do that today, because that will set pace for Cindy and I to go back and try to figure out where we reduce.
Let me make this one other comment. Excuse me, Randy. The other comment I have is we have committed to lower the power rate. So what we're saying is we're trying to have it both ways. We're saying we're only going to lower it a little bit by taking the transfer down. And that doesn't follow. We are going to get the power rates down if we believe what we're talking about. And I know we are.
Well, go ahead and take the 100 out. I don't have a problem with it.
Or go in the middle. If we've got in here 140 and you're looking really for 240, let's go for 200, reducing it. What about that?
And again, but let's, and I think I'm going to reiterate what he just said. on Wednesday afternoon, you have to set a tentative millage rate, and you can't go any higher than that in the rest of this process.
Right.
And you have to do it on Wednesday. So if we want to do that, now's the time. But remember, if you lower revenues by $200,000, then take out the bullet point list on the front of your memo and tell us which thing that costs $200,000 on that list you don't want to do.
Yep.
Okay. It's really that simple. We're down to, you gave us $1.7 million to work with. We allocated it to certain things. If you want to take some of it away, then you have to take one of those things away.
Well, the appraisal went up, and we're arguing, but it's a judgment. Amelia, what do you want to? Randy's got a number. Jay's got a number. I got a number. What do you want to do? It's up to you.
I like cutting it down the middle. I love splitting the baby. It's my favorite.
So it's 200,000. We're going to go down on the transfer.
So minus 60,000.
Right, minus 60.
So it's going to go down to 5,440. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, 5,440. Right.
So it's going down 60,000.
60,000. That's correct.
Yeah.
That ends my comments on revenue.
What do we think about Dodgertown? Is that probably going to happen this year?
I hope it will happen next fiscal year. The question is what are the proceeds we're going to get out of it? We have not really had a whole lot of interested buyers, and so we're not really sure when you put a piece of real estate out. You typically, a home in our community stays on the market for 90 to 120 days, so that could possibly take place over that period of time. I presume what we will do that, put it on the market for sale, or, we could go for an auction. But however we determine to do that, we're still...
And what would that... we probably won't be able to sell it for the total loan amount, right? And so we're not going to get the full use of $600,000. Aren't we paying $600,000?
About $700 a year.
$700 a year,
Close
and we're
to
not going to be able to get $700 a year out of this.
I don't think so. Because it's about $10 million that still remains.
So maybe we could get $300,000 or something.
Maybe two.
Okay.
Our goal would be is whatever the proceeds are, we would offset the debt service.
Yeah.
By either taking the money and actually spending the cash, or seeing if it would be more advantageous to refinance. I can't remember if that loan has a penalty for early prepayment on it.
Well, we could do one of our projects contingent on the fact that came through. We could take
that is true.
Yeah,
yes.
We could do something like a Leisure Square thing, maybe, or something else. We could do contingent on that coming through.
Right.
Okay.
All right, we move on to the agenda. It says the next thing is City Council, which is page 13 for those that are following along. My goodness, you have yours in a book, Mia.
Special
How well
request.
organized.
Special
For us men that just have piles of stuff. I don't have any comment on the city council, but I don't know anybody else.
It's the time to raise salaries.
Seeing no comment, do we want to move on to the city clerk? I don't really have any comment on that.
I just have a question about what the bill we're getting now that the election expenses are going up so much.
I'll come down there and explain that.
I'm expensive.
You will notice that every year our election expense goes up and down, and that's because on the years that the county has an election, we piggyback on their election, and our charge is 50 cents per voter. Now, this year we don't have a county election, so we have to pay the full cost, and it's $2.50 per voter. So
those people who aren't voting are costing $2.50 for not voting. Just want to let everyone know about.
Yeah, we encourage everybody to get out and vote, but that is. Yeah, so we like the years when the county does have an election, but that's why it goes up and down every year.
If you look at questions? The 13-14 actuals are right out to 22,000 from.
So this is this year. Okay, so next year we'll have 3 elections, so we'll expect it to go down quite a bit.
Yeah, next year we'll go back down to 6,000.
Because there's a March primary, an August primary, and a November.
Just really, it reflects our November election.
Okay.
Something we may consider is the election canvas board. I'm not sure the city manager has the appropriate position on that. Just kidding.
Yeah, he loves that part of it.
Spend an awful lot of time doing an awful lot of nothing.
Yeah, that's another nice thing. When it is a county election, then their canvassing board takes over.
Okay.
All right, are we ready to move on to city manager?
Thank you, Tammy.
Any comment there?
I assume we're going to have a reoccurring theme of the operating salary, social security, and pension.
That's the only places you'll see anything much outside the parameters. You can see the divisions where there was no change in personnel. It's right at the 3%, and the 9 and the 6, or the 4.6, is if there's an extra person, then the percentages will be higher.
And you're getting new office furniture, is that?
Yeah, is that a new desk, Jim?
Actually, it is a printer. We have
For padded furniture?
I don't want to make it too comfortable.
Inside joke.
No, I think that is our printer that we need to replace. We have one that has gone out of date, and we have it on one of these temporary maintenance contracts that are exceeding the price and the cost of operation.
Copier/printer thing.
Yeah, copier printer.
Okay.
All right, City Hall. I guess we're on city attorney. That one requires some discussion, I think.
Morning again. Now, hopefully everybody received my memo and the request.
Wayne, can we get you in a mic?
Hopefully everyone had a chance to see my memo and the requested budget from the city attorney. That's the same budget that you saw back in the last workshop. Basically, the main difference between that and what the city manager submitted, and remember, the charter requires that I prepare a budget for the proper operation of the office and submit it for inclusion in the budget. And of course, city manager and the finance director have a pretty tough job, and they've submitted a budget, but it does affect my budget. And that includes what we asked for was the addition of an attorney 2 position. We're down 40% of our people since 2011. The work hasn't decreased. If anything, it's increased. And it's never ending. All we're doing is putting out fires. We need an additional attorney. That's my recommendation. Plus, we need to plan for the future. Peggy and Catherine here and I are it. We're the entire legal department to serve this whole organization. And it's tough. There's lots of stuff that's going undone that we can't get to. There's projects that we've started literally years ago, such as our property maintenance code. We just can't get it done because so much day-to-day stuff is just devours our time. And it's not like we only work 8:30 to 5. We put in lots of extra time. Catherine's hourly, so we don't have any money for overtime, so she can't work extra. But anyway, obviously it's whatever the council wants to fund. I think all three of us truly see the need for this additional position, and that's why we asked for the extra funding. The difference is, and what I did was I took the median salary for an attorney 2 position, which is someone that's typically got at least 5 years experience, and the median salary is $85,000. So by the time you add benefits, and that's not to say we would hire someone at that, we would probably advertise in at a range of 70 to 85, somewhere in there. But with benefits added, brings up to 107, 196. Keep in mind that roughly right now, what we've calculated is about 36% of our budget is charged back out to enterprise funds. So in what would be from ad valorem is you're looking at a little over $68,000, $68,605 out of ad valorem. So that's our request, and leave it in your hands and how you want to proceed.
I would think we would have to put another attorney on there just to think about succession if we did lose an attorney.
Well, it's not an if, it's just when. It's going to happen. We're all over 60, I believe, in Catherine. I'm sorry, I wasn't supposed to say that. So, I mean, we're fastly approaching retirement age, and could be sooner than we think.
So this is outside of what we've already done.
That is correct.
Yes.
It's another
Well, like I said,
$108,000.
Mm-hmm.
I personally am not for it, but
It would be the net of that plus what gets charged out back out to the other funds, so it's about
Yeah.
69,000. I agree with those math.
you know,
My,
there's lots of issues that there's two rights on.
I know, but my fear is if you walk around a lot of these departments, we're going to have a massive brain drain, and we're not bringing anyone in to learn, to apprentice, to understand. It's complex, what we do.
I think that's something department-wide we haven't addressed. Yes.
So what's your pleasure, Randy?
My pleasure is not this year. I just see that we've got an awful lot of other things going on, but I'm willing to be convinced. What do others think?
I think the same thing as you. I think not this year, but I'm willing to be convinced for the future. But I've said that to start with.
well, if Peggy leaves next summer, as she's indicated she may, and I don't, then I'm able to replace her. Now, my time and Catherine's time is part of that's going to be devoted to trying to get someone up to speed. My goal would be I get somebody in the new budget year, would get them knowledgeable and able to do a lot of this work, which is not being done now. And then when Peggy leaves, we replace her. That person is able to get up to speed before I leave.
Is that a definitive?
I'm waiting to see the final document that comes out of the defined.
We need to be very careful here.
Well, I'm catching that, but the reason I say that is that it might not really be 68 because you're losing one and you're getting the benefit of the loss, but at the same point, you got to have somebody there that's trained to be able to catch the ball when one leaves.
But the proposal would be to budget for both.
For both,
so
right?
68 and the budget you're adopting. I mean, we have transition and turnover, pretty frequently, but we would be adopting a budget for both.
My fear is if we truly believe we're facing a brain drain and we know that's a coming reality, but then someone else is sitting here who doesn't feel that's an issue, then you push off and you wait and it's not addressed.
Yeah. Why is this out of sequence? Why wasn't this in the original budget that we?
Because we didn't have the funding. Because we didn't have the funding to do it. And the key is, and it's like Wayne said, that he is a charter officer, so he reports directly to you all. The key is that we put in prioritize the items that we had, and that's what is reflected in the budget. The city manager.
You didn't have this
We had the request because he did put that in the earlier request.
But it wasn't a priority of yours.
That is correct.
Okay.
Unfortunately, this charter officer, it's a priority.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Well, to me, there's one of your compromises here. Do it late in the year. No, I mean,
My concern is I don't think that we appreciate everything that goes into it. All of our boards are reviewed, all of the code enforcement meetings, all of the interactions we have, all the stuff we put out, making sure things are worded correctly on resolutions. And I mean, I would never want to do it.
Well, if it happens halfway through the year, split the baby and be happy.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think it sounds great.
Yeah.
Is there three to agree on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
there's three that agree on it. I'll even go along with it to make it all four.
Okay, so what we want to do is
34. I'm assuming 34?
So budget for that position to begin 6 months into the fiscal year. Is that what we're saying? So it would be about, let's just use round numbers today, 35.
This is a good example of our collective wisdom probably being better than any one of our individual wisdoms. I would certainly hope.
It works the other way, too.
Anyway.
But Cindy, that would be the total, including enterprises, the 107.
That would be the net.
To get to 6.
That would be the net. Let's just be clear. We would budget for that position to start halfway through the year.
Right.
And there would be a corresponding amount out to the other funds, and the net to ad valorem would be around 35.
Right. Okay. Anything else?
Everything
else is pretty static.
Quit while you're ahead.
Yeah.
I've been doing this a long time.
We did ask for one computer for Peggy that's on life support.
Computers have to be replaced.
Right. Okay.
We're not going to argue with computers, I think, anywhere in the organization.
Okay, thank you.
Does that go with the IT people as well? Is that what I'm hearing? Because somebody's got to keep and support those efforts, but we get to that a little later.
Yeah.
Okay, human resource risk management.
Anything that stands out in your budget you want to point out?
The only thing I wanted to point out is the software maintenance. We've requested for $14,000 in software maintenance. That is actually to put in an online application process for the city of Vero Beach. That will be a $5,000 initiation fee, and then it will be $9,000 a year. The vendor we have chosen is NeoGov. We benchmarked, they do approximately well over 100 other municipalities and governments in the state of Florida. And frankly, we are one of the few cities that do not have an online application. We still use a paper application that you cannot even write on. I mean, you have to write on it, you can't type it and save it. It's probably 30 to 40% of Chris Wagner's time is spent literally just pushing papers. If we could get the online application form, that would enable her to pick up some additional duties, relieve some of the stress when we have reporting requirements. Right now, we do it by hand. We count them. All right, we could do all of that electronically. It would enable us to be able to get the hiring process done much faster, in that instead of scanning paper documents, we could have the thing would just basically, with guidelines put on by HR, obviously, shoot them out to each individual department. So if Cindy has an immediate need for someone in her accounting department, they could apply online, we could see how it goes, and then as soon as we get the applications in, we can trigger it to go immediately to Cindy for her review. She can get back to us, we can get them scheduled. So instead of some of this taking months, we could cut it way down, in addition to freeing up a lot of my staff's time to be used on stuff that will actually benefit the city. I mean, frankly, we're being paid a lot to copy applications.
Sounds like an obvious.
Okay.
Okay.
And as you know, the risk division is actually in her department as well and has always been there. It's the way that it was financed and funded was the key.
Yes.
Well, you got off easy.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to know that, yes.
Well, I'm
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
No, I'm still curious here. I mean, I'm looking at the staffing tables, and there's no, in the staffing table, there shows no increase in the number of people, but yet, you're showing 157% increase in personnel costs and significant costs in operating. I mean, I'm sure there's an answer for it.
Yeah. The place to look is actually at, let's look at B that was attached to your memo. You got the cover memo? We'll look at attachment B.
Jay, this is that risk management.
Okay. Well, that makes
So down at the bottom, you'll see under risk management, which used to be a whole separate fund, that minus 2.5 people at the bottom in risk management equals the plus 2.5 people that are now in the general fund. They've always been in her department and under HR, but they've just been funded completely out of risk management before, and now they're back in the general.
Now they're back under HR.
And then being allocated back out to the departments on the basis of the allocation.
So now, typically, do we have a separate section in here for risk management?
Mm-hmm. And you don't anymore.
And you don't anymore. Okay. So should we just?
There's progress, Randy. Right?
So under the staffing table, should we just add those risk management people in there?
They are in there. That's why you don't see any difference. I believe in the staffing tables in the past they were in there anyway.
Okay, so in the past they were, but they were allocated.
There, but they were funded out of a different division.
If you look up there, it used to be human resources, and then we had a separate, now they're together, human resources, risk management.
Mm-hmm.
So we still have the same 4 people.
Got it.
Or 4 positions, I should say.
So now we're back where we should be.
Yeah, well, we had a residual balance in the risk management fund. See, risk management was like pooled insurance, so all the funds paid in, and we paid claims. Well, when we stopped and became fully insured, we had legacy claims, but we also had a residual balance from years of all the funds putting money in. So we went ahead and ran it on that residual balance for a couple of years, paying for the people that were still managing the claims. And now we're essentially down to a very small handful of legacy claims and just about enough balance to cover the claims retention on those claims. So we've essentially finally done away with that fund, and we're back to business as usual under fully insured.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're going to be entertained.
I got plenty of them.
We're on finance administration. This should be entertaining.
What I've asked for is one additional position. In the budget that you saw on June the 17th, it was a high-level position, essentially an accounting person. And after going through the attempt to lower the budget and the costs, I've lowered that to an administrative position, essentially an admin/bookkeeper, with the idea that if we had an administrative assistant/bookkeeper for some light data entry in the finance department, essentially what we do is free up the higher level people to do the things that we should be doing. Myself and Javier and my accounting supervisor spend a very large portion of our time, because we have no administrative assistant in the finance department. These books, are prepared by my assistant finance director, which, if I have someone to do this kind of work, then I can free that brain time up, if you will, to do some of the other things that we have as ongoing initiatives. There are things that have been on my list of things to do for 4 years since I got here. For instance, revising the city's short-term cash investment policy and looking our cash flow and restructuring our investments would probably, if done properly, result in enough additional interest earnings to pay for this position if and when I'd ever have time to do it. We have a lot of technology initiatives on the table, particularly in customer service, which is one of the divisions that I manage, and that will take a lot of time and focus to make those things happen. And certainly things like popular annual financial reports and some of the things that the Finance Commission would like to have that just haven't happened yet because I don't have the staff or the time. So that's what we're asking for, a low-level position to free up time for the higher-level personnel and to begin to allow us to tackle some of the initiatives that we think are worthwhile.
Cindy, you know what? I think you've done a wonderful job. And one of the things, management is getting things done through the others. If you think you need it, I don't got a problem with it.
Yeah. So that gives us more time to come up and ask you questions?
Oh, always have time for that. Always have time for that. I'd rather answer them there than here. Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, we're doing what we're doing, but there's just so many more things I think that are really value added and extra money for the city and or extra transparency for the city that I could do if I could free up some time and stop filing and copying and doing data entry.
Well, the amount of detail that goes into this and the amount of transparency that exists between you and what goes on here is amazing. I mean, the completeness of this is superb. It really is.
Thank you. I have an amazing staff.
Yeah.
They churn out. Of the people, the 10 people that are here, only really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us are in the finance per se, which means budgets, CAFRs, audits, payroll, accounts payable, grant, compliance, the whole shooting match. And it's 6 people that do it. So I'm really blessed to have an excellent staff.
And just as information, she lost a very good one, but she went down to human resources. So we're keeping that brain trust with us. So.
I also have a division that circulates the talent, unfortunately, because I've had a lot of turnover within, for instance, the payroll position. As payroll has become more complicated through our union negotiations, I've lost that person 3 times in the last year and a half. I've rotated 3 times. So I appreciate it. Thank you. And that will be very helpful. Other than that, the budget's pretty straightforward. That office supplies is really, I think, a few requests that were made by our cashiers for some printers and faxes and some improvements down there. So.
All right, finance and information technology. Are you ready to go ahead?
I just want to add one thing under administration, that if under major goals and challenges, managing cash and investments.
Sure. You said we need to get a new fax.
I have to admit to you, I don't know exactly what's there. I saw a little list of.
I don't think people faxed anymore.
Oh, we do. We get, for one thing, lien requests. We get those from real estate agents to clear lien requests for people buying properties. But I apologize. I don't know exactly what's on the list. I'll come back and let you know. I do not know.
All right, IT. Are we ready for IT? I guess we are.
You do.
As you know, IT has really two separate functions, and that's why you see Robert and Paul both. The additional position we're requesting is in the side that is essentially Paul's in managing the network resources, but certainly there are huge challenges within both, so that's why they both want to address their budget.
Paul Mills, Supervisor of Networks and Telecommunications. And
Robert Davila, System Operations.
What we're looking at on the budget, we are requesting a new network support technician. Again, it's just like a lot of the others we're having. I'd like to be able to spend some more of my higher level time doing things like researching security, looking ahead to the future, new technologies and whatnot. I'm spending a lot of my time right now working on, hey, my printer's not working, hey, my phone's not working, little things, how do I do this in Word, handling internet stuff, So we're doing a lot of that, and it's a little disruptive trying to do that, as well as, Robert and I, we also work on putting the budget together and maintaining our accounts and everything too, because we don't have a manager per se either. We look to Cindy for guidance, and but some of the things that we're looking at in the future here, we're looking at the replacement of the phone system. Is going to needs to be addressed over the next year or two. It's very aged. We're also looking at some core network upgrades that we're having that we're going to need to do because of hardware manufacturing. They're saying these units aren't going to be supported anymore. I need to make sure that we're able to communicate between all the buildings, with the citizens, with the website, everything. We need to make sure the network is up. As I mentioned, newer technologies for security systems, and just keeping up on technology standards. Technology is always changing, and it becomes difficult when we've got a lot of irons in the fire.
One of the things that we successfully fought our new auditors off on this year, that they were contemplating a comment on, is that we have no IT strategic planning committee. And, essentially we have two people, Paul and one other person, that manage all the computers, all the phones, and all the network resources for the entire city and for every employee in it. The idea of a strategic planning committee of one with no time to do it was something that we convinced them that we just could not undertake right now, but we did used to have one. And when he says he has no manager per se, less than 4 or 5 years ago, there was another department head within this department itself that that had the opportunity to sit and do the strategic planning and the forward-looking stuff. So we're asking for, again, a person at that lower level to free up the time of the management level personnel to do those kinds of things.
And you're also asking that on page 34, 35, 36, and 7, you've mentioned them that we approve the various things that are needed in the way of capital, correct?
Yes.
Yes, on the system operate. So.
Oh, go ahead.
On the system operations side, we're doing an upgrade for the MS Govern, which is the financial package we use. This is more to the platform that it runs on. It runs right now on Oracle, but we're going to SQL, Microsoft SQL. So it's actually what it runs on that we're upgrading. And a couple of operation printers.
The other big challenge in that side of the house right now is Robert and his staff are deeply involved in this upgrade to the electric utility billing software, which has been quite the challenge. 10 versions.
Right.
Yeah, 10 versions old.
10
and
years,
it's been quite a time-intensive.
What is the prognosis on that patient?
Prognosis on that patient is probably October, November.
Yes, we're working out all the bugs, if you want to call them bugs. But we're making sure when we go live, it goes correctly.
As I've promised everyone, it may not be fast, but when it happens, you'll never know it did. If you do know it happened, we screwed it up, because it should be transparent to the utility customer. Your bill should keep coming, and it should look the same. And if something happens with that, it wasn't done properly. So that we're taking our time and making sure it happens correctly.
What about the upgrades downstream? For instance, paying by debit or whatever.
Probably about a year away, because the second thing we're going to do, again, transparent but very, with a big impact on our workload back there, is once we get this platform set, in terms of the billing software, we're going to implement Lockbox, which means that all those mailed payments will actually go to a back-of-the-house processing center at Wells Fargo, and we're going to implement what's called eBox. Right now, when you go onto your bank and do an online bill pay, it actually generates a paper check that then comes to us worse than a normal paper check with no account number or anything on it, and we get thousands of those. So the eBox will make it a true bank-to-bank electronic transaction. Once we've got those three behind-the-scenes things done, if you will, then we're going to move into a upgrade to the websites, paying through us by credit card, through website, maybe, kiosks in the lobby, all that great stuff. But for right now, we're trying to get the platform there, bring the technology we have up to the current century, and then go from there.
What do you think?
This is a very obvious first step. No question.
I'd just like to commend Robert and Paul on the detail of your major achievement goals and challenges. You obviously thought through this and did a great job of putting that forward. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're okay with
just one quick question. I mean, you got an awful lot of projects. Is there a reason that the new person has to be full-time and they can't be like a project-based part-time?
Actually, on the project side, Paul's going to work with for the phone system upgrade, for instance. He's actually going to hire a consultant to help sort of do the project management side of that. What he's asking for is a person to, as he pointed out, my printer doesn't work, my computer doesn't work. I mean, there were quite a number of things that they used to do in support of resources that they don't even do anymore because they don't have the people to do it. And again, that in turn impacts the productivity of, think about it, if your computer doesn't work in this day and age, you're really probably not getting much work done until it does. And so we're really asking for a person to take that lower level troubleshooting day-to-day operations work so that Paul can begin to make sure that the health and safety of our network and the future of our network is planned for properly.
For example, somebody gets a new computer right now, we prep it, and then we send it in a box to them and say, good luck. We have to let them hook it up, and then they send it back to us. So that was one of the ways that we came up with some efficiencies in the department.
You okay with this, Jay?
Oh, that's fine. No, I just wanted an explanation. That sounds good.
Some of the other things like the exchange, because you had mentioned page 34, what we're running up against is the D-support of that by the manufacturer. So we want to make sure that we have support available and be on the latest versions and everything.
Okay, I think we're okay with what you presented, Robert and Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks for a good job.
Thank you.
All right, John O'Brien, purchasing.
Morning, Mayor, Council. If we want to start with the purchasing budget, we have no changes in our staff. The biggest change in our operating budget was software maintenance, and we found a software out there that really supports our contract management function. Right now we use a spreadsheet trying to keep track of all our open purchase orders, our current contracts, and all our insurances. Very manually intensive. This software will allow you to, one, notify you as well as the vendor to send out insurance requirements when they're getting ready to expire, and also allow us to set parameters to notify us when a contract's coming up to expire, and then gives us time to properly plan for that event. And it also gives the users visibility too. Every contract, even when you have insurance, you have the auto, general liability, they all have different expiration dates. So if you have 100 contracts out there, there's 300 different expiration dates for insurance on top of the contract's expiration dates. And it's one central location where anyone in our office has visibility of the status of the contract, whether it's coming up for expiration, the contract is, the insurance, or the status of someone who's doing something. So it's easier for me to also oversee from 30,000 feet.
How many contracts do you think we have?
Oh, gosh. Well, we probably have at least 70 out there that are just ongoing. You know, your uniform maintenance, all those are under contract. And then every time we do about 50 sealed bids a year, which contracts are associated with that. So it's like an airport project that can, you know, a runway repaving, you have insurances that go on throughout that. You have payments. Actually, I just thought it would be good for accounting too. They'd have better visibility of those type of contracts when they know they're going to expire. So really, unlimited visibility, 5 users, we only have 4 people in our office. Right. So it's a pretty inexpensive software that really allows us to, you know, hey, run this spreadsheet.
We're sold. We're spending too much time on it.
Okay, good.
Done.
Just one quick question.
Sure.
Schools and meetings?
Yes, I do have money in that. Right now, we've had about $500, which will get you to maybe 1 or 2 one-day seminars, and would like to try to get, and we have 3 professionals in our office, like to get to 1 fall workshop, and that's usually a 3-day. And even then, don't always go. I mean, sometimes there's one fluff day. They have vendor things. Sometimes I'll just go up for 1 day, you can pay part of the seminar. So we try to. I don't like to be gone for 3 days, but that's what a fall workshop typically in our profession costs.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and workstations also.
Oh yes, we have computers in there.
We're approving those too, right?
Yep.
Right.
Any other questions from the warehouse purchasing side?
No. Let's go to the warehouse.
The warehouse, there are no changes in our staffing. Our operating budget is I believe it's down a little bit. We're getting a new vehicle, so I think our maintenance went down significantly on that. In fact, our new vehicle, I think, is actually just about ready to show up. But that's the projected, for our maintenance to go down.
That's not the mail truck, is it?
Yeah.
Because I noticed that today it was brand new.
Did it?
Yeah.
Well, I heard it was
coming in.
Yeah, I heard it was
coming in like crazy.
I think he got it last week, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
That was our first round of vehicle lease purchases that we did this year. So.
All right, we're approving 2 workstations also. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, we have pretty old PCs there. They're all on the Windows, I think XP.
XPs.
One of the things that IT does is actually produces each year inventory of all the computer resources in every department, flagged green, yellow, and red, which gives each department head the idea of which things need to be replaced and are outdated. So that's one of the things that Paul and his staff do for the department.
Are we okay with the warehouse?
Yeah, I would like to say our warehouse has been doing a really good job. Rob Bolton's got his new step system in there, and as well as my assistant, has required a lot of work and coordination as far as the components and trying to get truckload shipments, and got some really good people working really hard to get the system so it can get out to the customer. And Rob's people have been great working with us on that. So just want to compliment them on their work. They don't always. They're not here at the meetings.
No, and good idea bundling up each system so that it's compact, more efficient to be loading it as you need it.
Pallet flip stuff.
Yeah.
This is one division that has definitely taken some personnel cuts over the years and managed to, continue to keep the operation rolling forward. Had to adjust inventory procedures and, kind of really think about ways to become more efficient in order to do the same things and more with fewer people. So.
Yeah.
Done a good job.
Yeah, we've seen the warehouse activity's gone up over 40% in the past year. So we're doing our best we can.
Okay.
40% is that can't all be due just to STEP, John. Is it?
The STEP system was overall 39% is, let me give you the exact number. As far as our no, the step system is just part of really the electric side of the house. Our issues and receipts and activities going in and out the door, materials going in and out, has gone up 39%. The step system, just on the water and sewer inventory, that's 140% increase in activity. And our general administrative's 5%. But that's the other thing you're seeing with our electric system too, is a lot of activity through there, which as they do their work, it trickles down to us. Someone has to give them all those materials and count them and do that. So I really got to commend the warehouse because they do struggle back there, and to have a overall 38-40% increase in activity. It's pretty good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for a good job. It is now 10:40. Do we want to take a break, or do we want to dive into planning? I don't care.
Please.
Okay, let's do planning.
Well, I've got police viz tomorrow. Right?
Yeah, I was just going along with the book, but that's...
Yeah, we saved police for tomorrow morning at the beginning. Kind of knock out all the smaller ones.
What page are we on? Has anyone found
47.
It? Huh?
46.
47.
I know.
Good morning.
Morning.
Basically, the difference in my budget this year is one, the code enforcement staff's been moved over, so there was 2 positions. So that's where you see a reduction to police. I'm being
We're just having a little controversy. He's got vehicle maintenance and doesn't have the vehicles anymore.
I don't
We just
have
because we transferred them, so that'll change.
That's a legacy.
Okay, because that was a question.
It was 0 in the previous one. That's why I didn't notice that till
We
just...
reworked that spreadsheet and then it got pumped back into here. So
great.
I promise you, there's more than just
I wasn't
that mistake
going
in here
nuts.
somewhere. That's the only
All
mistake
right.
we've
The other change you'll see is professional services. As you may recall, we've negotiated a contract with a consultant who's working with us now in the preparation of the comprehensive plan update. $15,000 this year, and we have $15,000 into next year to get this done by February of next year. So that's our major emphasis. We have a lot more work coming in. Staff is piled up but that's the priority, to get that done for our clients that come in and customers and answer questions and that. So, but you can see most of our effort this next year, the major effort is going to get that comp plan done, and then there's going to be an implementation program set up for 2 years. So we don't let the comp plan just sit on the shelf and gather dust, but actually try to do some stuff to implement on that. Other than that, I got a staff of 4. There's not a lot to say about that. Any questions?
We're also approving a PC, which I'm sure is no problem.
They're replacements, right, as recommended by IT.
The software maintenance, I'm not going to ask. Never mind.
No, that's all right. That's our Citizen Serve. That handles all our permitting and all that. We're doing a real effort to try to get everything paperless eventually. But we got mounds of paper we need to work on, but that's something we haven't been able to do. But this helps us certainly reduce a lot of work and made it a little more efficient for the staff.
Anyone have any problems with the budget?
No.
Good. Hearing none, I guess you're out of here.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have a tough job.
Thank you.
All right, where are we moving now?
Public
Works. What page are we working
60.
on?
Yeah, 60, 61.
It's yours. Sure. 60. Thank you.
We did.
He called me last night.
We're just looking like that.
both at the same time.
as long as you don't have to share the haircut.
Yeah. It's not the full Monty. It's
It's not the full Monty.
He's working hard on
Don, can you get your stuff up there?
I'll balance it here on my lap.
Okay. Well, Public Works is bringing our budget in this year with the same staffing levels we've had in the past. And just to give a scale of what size the Public Works function is, it's about a $5.2 million budget for all the general fund activities. If you add on the solid waste and the cemetery and the capital construction this year, we're talking about $13 million. A lot of that's in capital construction this year, $7.5 million. We have a large job that we're going to be doing this year in coordination and conjunction with the airport, who got the bulk of the funding through some DOT FAA grants. We're going to be replacing the bridge at the main canal, 34th Avenue, and also rebuilding Airport Drive from Atlantic Boulevard into the terminal building. So that's one of the biggest jobs that we've probably ever done with the bridge and the roadway there together. So just to give the public a feel for how big some of our operations are, but about $5.3 million in general fund expenses. So with that, I'll be...
When are we going to get into the capital budget for all of these? Tomorrow morning, okay. The only, on page 61, the only question I see is other contractual services, just a question. I don't have a problem with it. Just
the other contractual services, the reason the increase in there, the $15,000, what we're going to be doing this year at some direction we got from council is to apply for the lane reduction permit for State Road 60. So when that resurfacing job hits 8 to 9 years from now, whenever it comes up again, we'll have that permit in hand to do that lessening or reducing it to 2 lanes in each direction.
One question, is it the hospitalization insurance for engineering and survey is up 31%?
What I do when I prepare these budgets is I take the actual census of what people have chosen and then figure out what the average cost per department is. So in some departments, you'll see fluctuations because people change their elections. I mean, it's based on whatever the real census is as of May. So there's been some turnover or changes in the elections people made at open enrollment back in October in this division. Okay. And instead of doing one average citywide and then applying it, I do an average by department of actual cost.
Of actual cost. It's even more explicit. Thank you.
Some of the maintenance went down. I'm just looking at Public Works ground maintenance. Vehicle maintenance and motor fuel went down.
Yeah, in general, you'll see the motor fuel expenses went down across the board. When we do our projection at budget time, we use a U.S. Department of Energy website, and they give a prediction for fuel costs for the next 12-month period. Last year, those numbers were
about $3.68 a gallon for unleaded.
And this, there's
$2.68 this year, almost $1 a gallon cheaper.
Okay. So you'll see that across the board in all departments. The fuel has gone down. Yeah. Vehicle maintenance, you'll see that has gone down in most departments because of a couple things. What we do is we do a 7-year history on repair cost, and we use that kind of come up with an average figure for each group. We've seen that some of those costs have started to decrease some, okay? We are moving into our vehicle leasing program, so we've got newer vehicles that are coming on. Mm-hmm. And our new fleet manager found some allocations that he had to adjust. The police department was not getting the full allocation of their vehicle maintenance. So you'll see theirs is up, but across the board and all others, they should be down, and that's one of the reasons for that.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, because that was perplexing when you're thinking, hey, we're replacing vehicles and all, and I'm still seeing their maintenance go up. It didn't make sense, but it was a reallocation.
There was not a full cost allocation of the cost to the PD. They're a general fund group. Mm-hmm. It's just putting it in the the right unit.
Cindy, are we, like on page 68, 69, small capital items, are we doing those now, or are we doing those tomorrow?
There's two groups of capital. We've saved the capital improvement fund, like the Fund 304 for tomorrow, but these that are in the general operating fund, now is the time to address these. These are ones that are being paid for with operating money because they don't meet the requirements for 1 cent sales.
What is, on page 68, what's a thermoplastic
All our signs.
Huh?
All of our new, all the
Oh,
signs.
okay, thank you.
That's actually for the striping on the roadways. Yeah, the thermoplastic.
We have a thermo applicator for the signs, right, that does a heat.
Well, actually, we don't use heat anymore. It's a pressure applied product, but we used to use a heat product.
How many signs do we turn out? Like a lot.
Oh,
Just in general, I mean, I know there's signs all the time.
I couldn't venture to guess. It depends on
How many people knock over
how many
stop
people ask
signs?
for no parking signs and things like that.
How many calls they get from the city manager asking?
Just a question on page 68. The units say it's the end of their service life. What's the age of that?
Yeah.
Of those units?
They're 1997 is the one we're going to replace this year, and 1999 is one.
Okay, I'm sorry. That is on there.
We tried to get those in there.
Numbers.
And then on page 70, there's another stormwater pump. It says it's the end of its life, but it doesn't say the age of the current.
That one is a 1999 pump. Yeah, we missed the date on that. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty good life, though, huh?
Just one general comment, I guess I'd still like to see as one of the major goals and challenges that we're increasing to look for cost savings and improved efficiencies in the departments. And a question on page 74 under GIS, under interfund services, we're showing a decrease of 20%, and I would think with the step system would be seeing an increase in interfund services. Am I missing?
They're not. Most of the work that they did with the step system was early on, identifying the areas where the septic tanks were and doing that mapping for them. The reason it's gone down is they've had a huge effort in the last year or two is getting water and sewers, all their infrastructure in the correct format on the GIS layer. That work is winding down, so they will be doing less of the work for water and sewer this year. So that's going to be the billing difference.
Thank you.
Are we taking Public Works as a whole?
I guess we are.
Crestlawn, do you really only have one?
Well, before we go to Crestlawn, page 92, contract painting services, and that, I think we should be working page 94 backwards to wherever we started. Anything having to do with questions. Contract painting service, it's just a question of what it is, what are we contracting painting, but it looks like it's a constant.
Contract painting services, actually we'll be doing some second phase of painting at the Public Works compound.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. So questions up to page 93.
Actually, it looks pretty good. You don't have any really big changes that you've made.
Kept the same staffing level.
Capital projects, that's capital expenses.
That's where we're going to see the big things, but stands out. That's
Well, one of the questions you asked about in fleet management, you'll notice that our vehicle parts and supplies, which is where we pay for all of the various filters and parts, we're actually budgeting down $40,000 this year in anticipation of the combination of the reduced costs for the new vehicles and reallocating a few of those costs out to some other departments for some kind of maintenance things like chainsaw chains and weed eater heads and things like that that are really more of an operational cost and not a real true fleet maintenance cost.
What page are you on, Don?
Unfortunately, I don't have page numbers.
89.
My printer didn't spit out page numbers.
We're on fleet management. Under the goals, you have continue to investigate alternative fuel options. Can you say what we've done to date and what the outlook is on that?
well, we looked at some natural gas vehicles, But we just don't see without having, a large number of those to do where it's going to make any sense for us to do that. If we start seeing fuel prices spike again, it might be something that we look at. But we've looked at, some hybrids and some electric vehicles to maybe use as, something that does a lot of trips around town. But we just don't see that happening
The savings on it. Okay.
But we do have, we have a new fleet manager this year. One of our previous fleet manager had to retire early due to some health issues, and Bill Moody has moved over and taken over fleet, and just was able to, in the last month, hire a person to fill his vacancy that he had. So we're finally back up to full speed and making a lot of progress there now.
A question on facilities management. We have maintaining lighting in the city parks, et cetera. Have we explored LED lighting to try for cost savings in those areas?
We have, and Ted Fletcher and I are working together to try to find a way. He wants to do a pilot project to try a couple in a certain area to see if that really gives us the kind of bang that all the suppliers tell you it will. So he's going to be doing that on some street lighting things for us this year, and if we do, then we'll bring something back that will be a systematic implementation of that.
Okay, but I think not only on street lighting, but we could be looking at that on interior facilities as well. Sorry, I also done. I've got one more question. And on page 83, the sickle mower attachment.
Yeah, that's a ground.
Maybe
yes,
and it says current method of mowing ditch banks requires a grade off, which is expensive to operate and doesn't allow for easy accessibility to areas. So
the grade all is a telescoping piece of equipment with an excavator on the end. We had an attachment that we would put on the grade all to reach down to mow the banks, but you're talking about mowing with a $150,000 piece of equipment rather than adding a sickle mower attachment to a tractor. So this will let us use the appropriate piece of equipment to do that and free up the grade all for what it's designed for.
So will we realize any cost savings by this?
I don't think you'll see cost savings, but you won't be putting the wear and tear on the grade all and seeing that come in to be replaced.
Reduced risk.
Yeah.
And it should be more efficient. The tractor should be able to move at a quicker pace than the grade all does also. So there may be some efficiency in the speed of getting the ditch banks mowed.
Okay, any further comments, or are we accepting what's been presented?
Crestlawn, there's a really just
let's go on to Crestlawn, which is page 208 or something.
Is there really just one employee?
There is. Just one in the cemetery fund.
So the one
But
thing
it's also supported by the city clerk's office that does all the managing of selling the plots and
they actually, but they get an admin allocation, and we have relooked
Yes.
that again. So they get we increased their admin allocation to reflect what Tammy thinks they're really providing. The one thing I wanted to point out about Crestlawn this year, that's something you see for the first time, is a contribution from the general fund to support the cemetery so that it does not have deficit spending. We've talked about this a lot over the last few years, and essentially, until we get a sustained upturn in sales, we cannot continue to budget for and actually have deficit operations and continue to have a negative audited balance at year end. The cemetery is not an enterprise fund. It is what is known as a permanent fund, and as such, our auditors are concerned that when you call something a permanent fund, it has to have a residual restricted balance in order to technically make it a permanent fund. They pressured me last year with the production of the CAFR to eliminate the cemetery fund and simply roll it back into the general fund, which I explained to them was not going to happen without some conversation with council and And certainly over the years, council has adopted ordinances and resolutions that make it clear that the cemetery needs to be retained as a separate individual permanent fund. But we need to start moving back in the direction of actually having a residual positive balance in order to continue to support this as a permanent fund carved out separately from the general fund. So that's the reason you see this very small transfer. Certainly, this is one we will monitor, and as we come back into that positive cash position, we would stop doing it. But we feel like we need to turn the corner and go that direction, if for no other reason than to make the auditors happy, because that's why we're here.
I'd make just one small comment, and it doesn't matter whether you do it or not. But in the revenue side, I'd take $10,000 out of columbarium and put them in sales of gray space. And the only reason I say that, well, year to date, 7-month year to date, gray space has been 81,000, and of course, Mrs. Turner and Mr. Kramer know that the mayor gets to sign all of the certificates, and we have sales of gray space. But I got to tell you, a columbarium sales a rare commodity. I mean, it just is.
A couple things. Let me go back, Councilmember Old. We used to have 3 people in the cemetery fund. A couple years ago, look in a way to increase efficiency, we cut that down to 1, and we started doing the bulk of the grounds maintenance with grounds maintenance staff, and that's when you'll see the grounds maintenance line item that went into the cemetery fund. So we only have 1 person that's allocated, but they do get more grounds maintenance work from that group. The columbarium sales have been one of the things that has lagged what we thought it would be. We reduced the prices last year. Still haven't come up to the sales numbers that we thought we might. We could reduce those further to try to spur some sales, but that's a discussion we could have.
What is the price now? For council's information, year to date, 7 months. I haven't looked at 8 months. The columbarium sales were $4,000, almost nothing. For what it's worth.
Actually, to date, at the end of the month, they're almost 11,000 now.
Wow! They
had a couple sales that Tammy we talked about the other day. The sales revenues are running above what we projected. If you project them out through we've got the numbers through June. If you take the June's numbers and project them forward, it'd be somewhere around $230,000 this year. But that's assuming you have the same rate of sales in the last 3 months as we've had in the first 9. So, what that can get you if you put too much stock in that. But the columbarium's spaces are 38. Price here. For the upper 4 rows, for city residents, they're $1,900, and for out-of-city residents, they're $3,800. Okay? For the lower 2 rows, and we reduced those a couple years ago to nobody wanted to buy the lower ones, so we dropped those to $1,500 and $3,000. That's the market. Sebastian sells theirs for $2,000 and $4,000. The city residents did not. That's not to say we couldn't drop our cost to try to spur the sales. We have 960 columbarium units, and even if we drop the price another 15%, we could still pay for the whole cost of building the columbarium with 1 of the 8 columbarium walls. There's 8 walls with 120 units in each one. So,
what's the occupancy? What percentage of it is occupied?
Oh gosh,
very small.
5% maybe, less than 5%. So
reduce the price a little.
I don't think it's going to spur any more demand.
I was going to say, I don't know how price sensitive this. Yeah.
Move the stoplights, that might help.
Well, but one of the things you do
way to drum up business.
when someone comes in and talks to Tammy, we have a couple options for people that have done a cremation. We have in-ground cremain spaces, and you can buy a cremains lot in ground for $600.
Oh, wow.
Okay? And the columbarium is $1,900.
Yeah.
So it's a personal choice thing. Again, we could lower those rates and see what happens and look at it again.
That's not a bad idea, because I think real estate is probably something we should be protecting more than the vertical space in the columbarium.
I mean, if you lowered those spaces for the top four from 1,900 to 1,500, and for out of city from 38 to 35, we can see what it does. In a year, we'll have some more numbers and see if that helped.
Because certainly, we've talked about this. The alternative people do have is to simply have no space at all and keep those cremains in their homes. Mm-hmm. And the second thing is, I think you were saying there's been a little bit of a boom in popularity of columbariums at churches.
A lot of churches
and other institutions
have put one in at their church and offer that to their church members. So
you're competing against that, alternative as well.
My whole family's at the church, but anyway.
That, and those changes can be done by resolution. It doesn't have to be a part of the budget, but if you want us to do that, we could bring that back to you.
But I think also you're kind of at a balance of like a cultural shift, like a traditional way of doing it versus I think you're going to start having a population that is looking at alternative means of those kinds of decisions. Mm-hmm. So we just may not have hit the point where that's more of the desire.
I think it's worth bringing back. What do you all think?
Yeah. We'll prepare a resolution to bring that back.
What is the occupancy of the cemetery itself? I mean, how close to full are we?
Well, current sales, we still have about 10 years of inventory. What we are really lacking on are family spaces. We only have 2 family spaces left. We had a big sale about a month ago. But we have looked at, and I've talked to the city manager about, we've prepared a preliminary plat for some additional spaces just up to the north of the columbarium area in land that's already in the cemetery. And that would, if we did that, it would give us more family spaces to offer because we've already have people telling us they would love to have those spaces in the new family plot area. So that's something that...
Why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't you bring that back too?
We've got that ready to bring to a council agenda sometime 1st of August or the end of August.
Yeah, August
or September 17th. Sorry. But that's something we could do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is the $26,000 we're putting into the, I could figure it out myself, but I'll ask Cindy here. Is that making up past deficits, or is that subsidizing?
It is subsidizing the current year budget just to make it, the budget we're proposing just to make it flat. If he does better than he's thought in coming years, then it would begin to dig us out of that hole. Right now, we ended fiscal 14 $88,000 negative. So that's what we're trying to dig out of. In addition to adopting balanced budgets going forward. So I would propose that if we budget for it and his revenue situation improves, that we leave it until we've reached a positive number.
Yep. All right, any further comment on the cemetery? Jim, is there anything further we are to do today?
Give you your daily recap of your money.
Yes, that would be very important because that's going to sort of carry us forward. Thank you, Don.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for a good job, guys, too.
Thank you very much.
So give us a perspective where we are.
So if I have all the puts and takes correctly, we went up in revenue, as I said at the beginning, by about $97,000 between the 2 state revenue sharing sources. We went back the other direction by 60 when we reduced the electric contribution to the general fund. We went back the other way by about $35,000 when we when we did the 6 months attorney position, and essentially we're back where we started. We went up about 95, 96, and we went back down 95. So we're flat.
So the first day is a zero-sum game so far.
Yeah, but I mean, the problem that we have to face on Wednesday is we haven't gained anything against offsetting a tax increase. But anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're still where you sit at the 30+%.
But you haven't gotten to the big areas either.
Yeah,
We've just done the easy
trimming.
Yeah. The recreation and police are going to be big numbers.
The non-departmental transfer to general fund construction, and then the general fund construction. Those are all tomorrow morning.
Your capital projects will be another one. Although, as Cindy points out, you can't mix the two, but there is $400,000 going into the capital projects that could be theoretically trimmed or shaven or whatever.
I just want to say I'm really glad we made this 3 days this year. Shortened it up. May even shorten it even more. But I'm glad that we went from 5 to 3.
If you want to keep going, but.
That's fine.
We're full-time employees, so anytime.
We're here. We're here all day, so whatever you'd like.
Anyone have any summation they'd like to make, or then we'll take a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn until tomorrow, 9 o'clock.
Okay, we're adjourned.